Welcome, everybody. The African American Employee Resource Group is delighted to launch the 2024 Black History Month with a town hall with our honored guest, Dr. Asmeret Berhe. Please join us for our other Black History Month activities that we'll have this month. But now let me turn it over to our lab director, Mike Witherell.
Thank you, Deb. It is a great honor and privilege to introduce you today to our special speaker, Dr. Asmeret Asefaw Berhe, the Director of the Office of Science for the U.S. Department of Energy and one of my bosses. She is currently on leave from the University of California, Merced, where she holds the Ted and Jan Velasco Chair in Earth Sciences and Geology, and is a professor of soil biogeochemistry. She is an accomplished scientist and administrator. Her scholarship and efforts to ensure equity and inclusion of people from all walks of life in our scientific enterprise have received numerous awards and honors. She is a member of the National Academy of Engineering, a fellow of the American Geophysical Union and the Geological Society of America, and a member of the inaugural class of the U.S. National Academy's New Voices in Science, Energy, and Medicine. But before all of that, she earned a BS at the University of Asmeret in Eritrea and a master's at the University of Michigan, and then came here to Berkeley, where she pursued a PhD, found her way to the lab as a graduate student researcher, which is a wonderful story. We are honored to call her an esteemed member of our community. All of the lab directors in the Office of Science have benefited from her stewardship of our organization. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Asmeret Asefaw Berhe to our virtual stage.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to join you today. Really great to be here today with everyone to kick off Black History Month. As you heard from Mike, I'm now serving as the director of the Office of Science. I've been on this path for almost 3 years now, since I was honored to be nominated by President Biden and then confirmed by the U.S. Senate into my current role. 2 years officially, almost, since I took over as director of the Office of Science. It's been nothing short of an amazing honor for me to be in this position, where we get to push hard really against many different kinds of boundaries to make sure that the scientific research that is done in the country is as advanced and resourced as it can be, and to make sure that it's also as inclusive as it can be. So I look forward today to sharing a few of the kind of things we're working on my approach, and one that Berkeley Lab is very much involved in, of course. I'd also like to talk a little bit about continuing kind of remaining barriers that folks from different communities that are historically minoritized in STEM face, and explain a bit about what we're doing at the Office of Science to bring everyone to the table, if you will, to be able to enjoy the science work that we all love. I would also like to take a quick moment to thank and acknowledge members of the Berkeley Lab's African American Employee Resource Group for organizing this and for inviting me. It's really a huge pleasure. I really thank everybody for this. As you heard, LBL was my entry into the world of DOE early on when I was a graduate student, and I was thinking about this earlier today, and it's been almost 23 years since I started working in different capacities and being engaged at the lab. And a long time ago when I was there, obviously there were very few people that looked like me, and to be fair, this was not a unique problem at LBL. So it was also exactly the case downhill at Berkeley campus and countless other research and higher institutions across the country. And it even remains so largely, of course. But I did, kind of really, Berkeley Lab holds a really special place in my heart, because I feel like I found a supportive community of folks, a mentor that has been incredible throughout my career there, to really, kind of see the potential that exists in places like Berkeley to make a positive influence, and not just individuals' life, but really in so many other aspects. I'm now really glad to see Berkeley Lab's robust portfolio of ERGs, which provide an inclusive, employee-centered approach to integrating and applying the principles of equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility throughout the lab. And as one of the 10 national laboratories we manage from the Office of Science, Berkeley, of course, remains a shining star in so much of what we do. I will not talk to you all about the Office of Science, because you're all very familiar with it, of course. But I'll just say that I'm proud to be leading the largest funder of physical science research in the nation, to manage an 8.1 billion a budget annual that allows us to support over about 30,000 researchers at more than 300 institutions across the country, and in all of the 17 Department of Energy national laboratories, and of course also allow us to manage and make accessible the 28 state-of-the-art national scientific user facilities and the 10 national laboratories, including Berkeley Lab, which are truly the crown jewels of the US's science and technology ecosystem. And from day one, when I took over this job, one of my priorities has been to look, to think about how can we broaden participation of people from all walks of life in all the work that we support. How can we make sure that science, becomes more and more inclusive with every action that we take, if you will. And I'll talk a little bit about this too. And I'll take a minute to tell you a little bit about me, share a little bit about my personal background and experiences in STEM. So long before I came to Berkeley, I was born and raised in Asmeret in Eritrea, in the Horn of Africa. I've always loved reading, science, school. In fact, because of all that, my dad in particular and other members of my family used to call me the professor when I grew up, largely because I had my nose in my book, and I used to really like to try to help my siblings with their homework, the older siblings. As you can imagine, that went as well as, you're all imagining right now, a little kid trying to explain to their older siblings what they're learning in school. But I just love being able to learn about something and share it with others. And I think that kind of remained as an inspiration for my own academic and scientific career throughout. I'm, of course, very much honored to be the first earth scientist to lead the Office of Science. I've been studying soil since I was an undergraduate in Eritrea. I love soil. I think soil is an incredibly fascinating world that's right under our foot, that too often too many people just don't know enough about it and have enough appreciation of not just the important role it plays in feeding the world and regulating our climate, but also how incredible of a medium it is as the most complex biomaterial that we know of in the Earth system. And that has been really a big part of who I am as an academic. After I graduated from my undergrad, I moved to the US, and I've attended, as you heard, Michigan State, and then Berkeley for my PhD. And I've stayed, in my career in the UC system since then, with the postdoc also that I did at Berkeley and UC Davis, and then later my faculty position at UC Merced. But I will mention here that LBL will always remain a special place for me, because a significant part of my PhD research was done at or in collaboration with scientists at LBL, in particular Margaret Thorne in the department what used to be called Earth Science Division. And I've also, I should mention that I also reconnected with an old college friend at Berkeley Lab, who ended up being my husband, who was a scientist at the Berkeley Lab when I was there, and who's now my colleague at UC Merced. So LBL's Earth Science Division holds a special place in my heart. Next slide. So I said this already, so we can skip that, you know, of the Office of Science being this incredible place. So I wanted to, you know, especially since this is an event being held in honor of Black History Month, I wanted to really talk about what it takes to make sure that people from all walks of life get a fair shake, if you will, in STEM. And I will start by telling you that, you know, most of us, one way or another, we, you know, realize the lack of diversity in STEM. And to me, this message hit home more than anything when I was a grad student at Berkeley. When I realized as I was walking down a hallway one day, going to my class, and the department is a pretty big department, environmental science, that had a lot of students, hundreds of students. And they used to post pictures of everybody who was a student there in the hallway. And I walked down the entire hallway, and it hit me at the end that I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I ended up being the only Black student that was in the department for years. And it's to this day, it's pretty rare for me to meet other Black scientists, particularly in my field of geosciences, which is roughly as diverse as physics and a few fields of engineering, which if you're not familiar with why I'm mentioning those three, that's because those are some of the least diverse fields in STEM. And as a researcher, I've asked myself, why? Why is this the case? Why has this persisted to be the case? And in my academic life, before taking on DOE role, I devoted a lot of time to really understand the scholarship on this issue, to try and understand not only was I curious to understand, you know, kind of why is this keeps happening, but especially, you know, because I wanted to be part of the group that makes a difference in improving things. You know, because in my present position, this takes an even more important, renewed importance, because you could see that nations who do not allow, you know, a vibrant, large population of people to engage in science have, you know, risk falling behind, at least when it comes to scientific competitiveness. And there's many reasons why it's important to pay attention to this issue. And I think it's extremely important as public institutions that we are making sure nobody is excluded from the scientific enterprise. But the reality is that the playing field in STEM is not level. It has never been level, and it still is not. I'm pretty sure this is not news to anyone here who's been following the issues of diversity in STEM. But, you know, but to give you an idea, though, these are all lists of scholarship that has been published over many years. And there's a ton more, obviously, in this respect that demonstrates why and how the field is not level for people who come from different backgrounds. In fact, when I was, you know, kind of in my previous position before coming to DOE, we did some work through an NSF-funded effort that we call the Advanced Geo Partnership, that was able to document behaviors that affect folks from all walks of life in STEM. And among many other important findings, we demonstrated that 50% of Black women and 50% of folks who identify as non-binary actually consider leaving the scientific workplaces they're part of because of hostile workplace climates that they experience. And for many other minoritized groups, including Black men, about a third have also considered or are actively considering leaving their profession because of their experiences in the workplace. So to me, this is not just a matter of who gets in, but also who gets to enjoy the long-term benefits of a STEM career, who gets to contribute to advancing the scientific missions of the nation and the departments and groups that we're all part of. So over the years, we've tried to reframe this conversation to get this important message to come out. And if you click one more time, yes. So, you know, in many ways, what we found is that there are many ways by which existing biases in society manifest in STEM environments at different levels. And the playing field, as I mentioned, is of course not level. And then the expectations for success are also not the same for people from underserved and marginalized communities. And again, all of this has been documented with tons of scholarly work over the decades at this point. And many people describe this using a leaky pipeline metaphor that demonstrate that somehow people from minoritized communities mysteriously drop off STEM. You know, they leave their careers. And I've argued over the years that using this metaphor is actually not just helpful, but it might even be hurtful, because it's not an otherwise robust infrastructure or ecosystem that's just losing a few people here and there. It is a systematic challenge. So it's made out of systematic challenge that people experience over their entire careers, starting from the time they're trying to enter STEM and all the way as they go up in careers. And so I've tried to kind of myself and many of my colleagues who've worked on this, we've tried to reframe this conversation around a hostile obstacle course. People from minoritized communities have to face and move through a hostile obstacle course before they succeed in STEM. And this exclusion, as I mentioned, is not limited to recruitment and retention, but also extends to who gets to succeed, who gets the opportunity to even succeed in STEM, and folks from different minoritized communities in a variety of fields in STEM, including my own field of geoscience and earth science, continue to experience these hardships. And so instead of distracting ourselves with a kind of a pipeline metaphor that is not necessarily helpful or it doesn't explain what is happening, we've always thought about thinking of how can we address these deep, sometimes structural problems that exist in our scientific institutions that make it hard for people from different backgrounds to enter STEM. And I think this is very, very important, because we are, especially where I sit right now, we're stewards of public resources, and we have a responsibility to make sure that every member of the public has a fair opportunity to enter and succeed in the STEM ecosystems. Because if we're not doing that, we are not serving the public mission, the public's mission, and the reason why the public entrusts us to actually lead in these avenues, right? So next slide. So at many places, including Berkeley Lab and other national laboratories, user facilities that we manage, there's a strong effort in place to improve these conditions. And of course, at headquarters in the Office of Science and DOE as a whole too. And I, of course, very much applaud these efforts. While we have a long way to go to address these long-seated, if you will, inequities, I think recognition of the issues as a first step is happening. We're also recognizing that the diversity of thought of people from different backgrounds is very, very much needed in the scientific work that we're doing and the research teams that we're setting up to address critical, so the huge societal problems that the country and the world are facing right now. As I say this, think about the climate crisis, energy crisis, food security, water security, and even understanding mysteries of the universe and so many other related questions, right? Having people who think about issues from a variety of different experiences and directions is incredibly important to address all of these major societal and scientific challenges. And so to just tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the Office of Science to address this, by extension, a lot of things that are happening at Berkeley Lab, of course, to broaden participation. We're taking advantage of the moment and the support that we have with the current administration, with the Biden-Harris administration have been very, very clear about broadening participation, including through efforts like the Justice 40 initiative and many others. And so throughout the Department of Energy, then, we're increasing funding opportunities for new applicants that are seeking resources, funding from our organization. We're expanding strategic engagements with key groups, in particular ones that have been historically minoritized in STEM, and also expanding strategic engagements with all of our stakeholders, addressing the internal gaps that we see in our data to really identify who DOE engages with in outreach, who applies, and who gets benefit of the resources that we award, and so much more. And one of the recent efforts that we've been working on, for example, is an effort to try and bring as many of the different communities that have been historically minoritized in our portfolio as possible into the fold, and introducing them to the work that we're doing and to the resources that we have available. We call this the Fostering Great Minds and Great Ideas Initiative. And as a group, myself, leadership from a variety of our science labs, and other science leaders and others in the lab ecosystems have been working together, and in fact traveling across the country together, and to really engage communities that have not received a fair share of the federal benefits, federal resources for science, including partnering with a variety of emerging research institutions. So the broad category of institutions that receive very small federal funding for research, which in many cases include small rural schools, minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, or at least tribal serving, and others category of institutions that may be small or less resourced. And we're trying basically to go where the communities are, reach them where they are, explain to the, kind of how they can work with us and help them find the connections with the federal science ecosystem, with the national laboratories, and provide funding, training grants, funding for great training grants, capacity building grants at those emerging research institutions to make sure that we're folding them into the fabric of all that we're doing in the Office of Science. And of course, we have many funding opportunities, some of them continuing, some of them more newer initiatives. The alphabet soup, I assume, that you see in the last two bullets, I assume many of you are familiar with them. The continuing initiatives, for example, are for graduate students, for computational science graduate students specifically, undergraduate researchers, community college students, and visiting faculty who want to spend time in our laboratories. But we're building on those and kind of bolstering some newer initiatives that target the emerging research institutions, in particular Renew, which is a training grant opportunity that we've created. FAIR is a capacity building, complementary to Renew, so capacity building. And then we introduced the peer plans, which are now required for all funding coming to the Office of Science, for all funding requests coming to us. To demonstrate, we're asking researchers to demonstrate how the work they're going to do that the public is funding is going to be inclusive, and at the very least is not going to be exclusionary to any member of the public. There's a lot in this space that we could talk about, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into detail. Next slide. I just want to use the Earthshots as an opportunity to elaborate on how we're thinking about these broadening participation efforts. Many of you, I assume, know that the Earthshots, the Energy Earthshots in particular project is inspired by the challenge President John F. Kennedy posed to the nation in 1961 to land a man on the moon within a decade. Earthshots are trying to do the same thing, but to address the climate crisis. So if you click one more time, the Earthshots will accelerate breakthroughs for more abundant, affordable, and reliable climate and clean energy solutions within a decade. These are the solutions that are on the cusp of making important contributions to solve the climate crisis, but they have major scientific gaps that need to be closed. So to make, just like to make the moonshot successful, many different players were needed, from government, scientists, engineers, and plenty others. DOE has launched this all hands on deck approach to enable critical work on key science advances that are needed for these climate change solutions to be a reality. Next slide. And there's 8 of these energy Earthshots in total that are listed on the slide, as you see. And the way I think about it, right, especially when it comes to scientific institutions, how we address this issue of addressing the climate crisis has to involve, there is no, kind of no ifs or buts about it. We have to consider principles of environmental justice and how we're implementing these solutions for the climate crisis. And if we are going to do that, then in scientific institutions in particular, we cannot advocate, we're doing environmental justice work, or we care about environmental justice, if we can't even figure out a way to broaden participation of people from all walks of life in STEM. So to me, broadening participation efforts sit at the heart of solving the climate crisis. And I'll stop talking about, things at this point, just in the interest of time, but I will just say that, I'm really grateful to be joining you today in this Black History Month event. Of course, Black History Month is an incredibly important and poignant, if you will, moment in time every year, where we can pause to highlight some of the challenges and struggles and also achievements of African Americans in the nation, and really think about how much has been achieved in spite of huge obstacles that folks have obviously faced over a long period of time. So I encourage everyone to join us all in the conversation, and really want to thank the African American ERG in particular that has planned this event. And I'm looking forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thanks for advocating for the new initiatives on Renew and FAIR and the peer plans. People have really enjoyed digging in and being a little creative about how to apply those to our work we do here. So that's been very helpful. So I will just take my prerogative for one question to you, and before turning it over to everybody else. So you talked about the Fostering Great Minds initiative of traveling all over the country to raise awareness about the work we do and the needs we have for workforce at the Department of Energy. So tell us a little bit about what else the labs can do to help that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier in this engagements, we've been traveling to different kinds of institutions along with the science leadership in the laboratories, because what we're trying to achieve here is a bit more than what the labs have already been working on, in terms of bringing interns from a variety of different types of institutions and different parts of the country to the lab for a summer, if you will, or a few weeks to engage with the national laboratory scientists. But now we're trying to go beyond that to establish more sustainable, longer-term connections that will also help build the capacity at those institutions. Because the reality is, this is such a daunting problem that we have in STEM that we're not going to solve it by just bringing interns, a few interns to a few institutions, or just with, smaller measures like that. So we're trying to expand that. I think what would be really wonderful, and what we've talked about with the folks who've been engaged with us in this respect, is really to think about, we've provided the introductions, we've gotten the connections with the institutions, we've appreciated it so much, appreciated just learning about the national labs and the funding opportunities. But we're trying to, asking our partners in the national laboratories to continue these connections, to continue build connections with the researchers, leadership at these kinds of institutions, not just the ones we visited, but all over the country, of course, to keep thinking about how not just, again, how we bring interns into the labs, but also how we help partner with them in the science work that we do, so that they build capacity and that these contributions can be sustained.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to turn over to Dan Wentworth and Jonathan Nurse, and they're going to facilitate the broader discussion here for us.
Thanks, Dr. Berhe and Mike. Good afternoon, all. I'm Jonathan Nurse, the Lab's Director of Federal Relations, and it's my pleasure to help moderate this Q&A segment. And Dr. Berhe, thanks again for joining the lab community today to kick off our Black History Month activities. We're honored to have your perspective and have collected a few questions from across the lab. We'll also share some that come in from the chat. I encourage my colleagues to see Diane's post in the chat inviting your questions. First, a two-part question. Our Black History Month theme is inventors and innovations. Who have been influential inventors in your life? What innovations have made the most impact in your eyes?
That's obviously a big question, and one that I grappled, because I could come up with so many different names, right? And The one person that I ended up settling is Bromary, and this is a person who is a geoscientist actually. But he ended up becoming a lot more influential, not way beyond geology. He used to be a professor at UMass Amherst a long time ago, and he rose up to be the provost at UMass Amherst. And in his capacity, he created the first archive of W.E. Du Bois' works. And so the reason why so many, kind of influential works in the world of sociology and the world that, this incredible thinker kind of influenced was made that much more accessible to a lot more people, because this geoscientist, in the position that he found himself in leadership, decided that this is extremely important and people need to know about it. And boy, was he right. Right. And so because he's clearly in my field, I thought I would mention him, maybe also as an indication that our influence can actually be way further than our field, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
You co-authored 10 Simple Rules for Creating an Anti-Racist Lab in 2020. Thanks for having a brief discussion with the AAERG about that. For the broader group, tell us about the observations that informed that piece. What progress have you seen? What next steps are required?
Yeah, so this was a paper that my colleague Bala Chowdhury, who is an associate professor at Dartmouth right now, and I wrote soon after the George Floyd incident. And the idea here was to really think about what can we all do within the environments that we have influence over, to make conditions better, to make sure that people have the support that they need, at the very least, the understanding of the challenge that different people face as they're trying to do science. Right. And we present a number of examples of challenges that, people of different races, for example, experience both within their academic or research institutions, but also in maybe when they're doing field work, that what they could experience when they're doing field work alone in remote places like people in our field typically do. And the kind of awareness that needs to exist for those kinds of challenges so that people can thrive, right? Can at the very least, so that the leaders can recognize whether the leader is a PI of a small research group or a leader of in the university system or other research ecosystems, can recognize what it takes to address the inequitable conditions and maybe even obstacle course that, as I discussed earlier, that exists for different types of people. People from different backgrounds. And we talk about in those 10 simple rules, I want to be clear about the fact that there is nothing simple about addressing racism, right? But we all can do things that will contribute positively to improve situations for people. And these are 10 simple things that folks in leadership in particular can do to make sure that the members of minoritized communities within their ecosystem can feel safe, can be able to focus on their work and actually thrive on their work, and include things like lead informed discussions about what exactly does anti-racism mean, right? Because there's a whole lot of misunderstanding or maybe even misleading efforts to kind of talk about these topics that are not always helpful, because all we're trying to say is everybody deserves equal, fair treatment, right? And I don't think there's anything controversial about that. So maybe if we actually engage with this literature, with this scholarship in a critical manner, we're all scientists, we're all willing to learn, or at least engaged in different kind of works, right? So let's read the scholarship, let's learn it and recognize that there's nothing controversial about everybody needing to be treated equally and in an equitable and a fair manner. And then how can we address if there are, kind of maybe things that maybe impact different people of different backgrounds unfairly? And this don't necessarily have to be conscious obstacles that people put on the paths of others, right? It could be a whole lot of things we are not aware of or we're not seeing because we don't experience them. But learning from one another and thinking about the mentoring practices that we employ, as well as how we can amplify and support scientists from diverse backgrounds in the scientific environment. And how can we also advocate for leadership to make sure that, you know, there are 10 rules in that article, and the rule number 9 states that we should, you know, there's ways we can all advocate for racially diverse leadership in science. And rule number 10 states that we need to hold the powerful accountable and make sure that they don't expect gratitude for just doing the right thing. And I think those are important conversations. They may be sometimes difficult, but they're very, very important conversations we all should have, and just learn from the scholarship. Again, I'll revert back to the fact that everybody engaged in science is learning all the time. So to me, this is just another piece of, you know, kind of the learning experience to learn about what do people from different backgrounds need to thrive in an equitable manner.
Well said, and thank you, Mike, for placing the link to the piece in the chat. I encourage all of our colleagues to take a look. Our third question that we have for you, since 2022, you've headed the DOE Office of Science. What accomplishments are you most proud of? What challenges lie ahead?
Oh, I think I'm most proud for, maybe I'll mention a couple of things. There's a few things.
Sure.
And I'll be very clear, the fact that nothing happens by just me in a job like this. Plenty of people contribute to make the work successful and the effort successful. I'm very, very kind of happy, if you will, for being a supporter and cheerleader for all the science that we do in the Office of Science. Because I think that's extremely important for making sure that when I took this job, I committed to being a champion for science and a champion for all the science that we enable. And I think I've held my end of that bargain. And I'm also very, very proud of the different ways we are trying to make sure that we're broadening participation of people from all walks of life. I mentioned that this was one of my top priorities when I took up this position. And we've done a lot. Again, not just me personally, but a lot of the incredible folks that I'm fortunate to work with that have spent a lot of time and effort on this is making a difference. And we're seeing it in the numbers. It's way too early to start patting ourselves in the back, but I think we're seeing a lot of really positive trends. And so I think I'm super proud of that.
Excellent.
Mm.
One question that we have is from the audience is about the slide on exclusive excellence in STEM. What is meant by minoritized communities in this context?
Yeah, so I intentionally use the word minoritized because I think it's very important to recognize that people don't, you know, just if you think of numbers, don't become minorities, especially in institutions like STEM by accident. It's not a historical accident that some people are overrepresented in STEM and others are underrepresented in STEM. It's because there's been active forces that pushed people out, that prevented people from different backgrounds from entering STEM. So if we're going to talk about building a vibrant STEM workforce for the nation, we need to make sure that the resources, opportunities are available to people of all walks of life in an inclusive manner. And science is inclusive. There's no exclusionary behaviors that are tolerated in our scientific enterprises and ecosystems. And so minoritized refers to the fact that something made a group a minority.
Very good.
Right? Something, somebody, some group.
Last question, in the interest of time, we will certainly have to continue this conversation in other settings. As an influential Black woman scientist, what would you like early career scientists from underrepresented groups to know about advancing their careers?
There's a lot that we could talk about, but one of the things that a couple of the things that I share with people is one, whatever you do, right? Make sure you find yourself in your corner with a lot of people who will be supportive of you and will support you in all the ways that you need support. All of us need mentoring. All of us need sponsoring. All of us need support to go through our education and career journeys. It's not a weakness to seek mentorship. If anything, it's a strength, in my opinion. So be very purposeful about seeking the supportive people that will mentor you, that will sponsor you, that will be there for you when you need support. This is, please, I don't want anybody to confuse this with, getting people to hold your hand or anything of that sort. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, networks matter. Supportive community matters, not just for the challenging times to help people weather through some challenging times, but also because it's very important to learn and to see role models, to see and learn from people how they've succeeded in doing whatever it is that you're interested in achieving, and also to get feedback from people you trust, that always want your best at heart, right? So I personally feel like I've benefited tremendously from having, from being really fortunate to have my mentors, and my, not just my, kind of senior mentors, so my professors or advisors, but also peer mentors that I've had over the years. That is an incredibly important. All of them contribute to supporting me in all the ways that I need support from time to time. And my best advice to people, especially early career folks, is look around you. See if you can identify people who are supportive of you, people who appreciate you for who you are, that will not create barriers for you, but rather be your cheerleaders, and will guide you in all the ways that we all can get benefit by being guided. So that would be what I would tell folks.
That's an excellent point to end on, and I think applies beyond early career folks to our, our full lab community, particularly our support staff and administrators who might also be early in their career.
Yeah, allow me to say one thing, and that is, I think that's a really important point. We don't appreciate all the people that contribute to helping science and scientists succeed. Sometimes when we talk about science, we just focus on the scientists. And I think it's extremely important to recognize all the different people who play many different roles to ensure that science as an enterprise succeeds. So yes, applies to everybody. Thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I believe that concludes our time for questions today. Dr. Witherell, the floor is yours.
Okay, fine. I'll wind us up. So first of all, let me second that last statement. Everyone needs mentorship in their careers, something that I've said 100 times, and so I agree completely. And thank you, Asmeret, Asefaw, Berhe, for joining us for today. Kick off our Black History Month. We really appreciate hearing about your career journey. I've had the chance to hear some of that story, but that everybody here has been able to hear it. And we look forward to working with you as we have been at DOE. So everybody here, please join us in thanking Asmeret Asefaw Berhe for being with us today. So a round of applause.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
And then the last thing, I would like to thank the African American Employee Resource Group and their steering committee for collaborating with us to bring us this great occasion, to be the occasion for this virtual visit in Town Hall. Thank you so much. And everybody go in peace and have a good weekend. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.